specific with the torso. We are odd creatures, moving forward like upright sticks. Quadrupeds are aerodynamic. This is the basic torso construction of most four-legged animals. Let's take a look at it. Vertebrate animals grow out from the spine, so that's a good place to start. The spine connects the rib cage, also called the thorax, and pelvis. Notice that the core of a quadruped spine is convex to the top, but the contour is concave because these spikes, known as dorsal spines, create the contour. The neck is the cervical portion. The thoracic portion is the part that holds the rib cage. The lumbar portion is the lower back. The sacrum and caudal portion make up the tail, and they are a continuation of the spine. An animal's tail goes through its pelvis. We also have a tail, but it curls back under, keeping us dignified. We have shoulder blades on our backs. Animals have shoulder blades on their sides. Human rib cages are shallow from front to back, wide from side to side, and we have flat chest bones. That's the sternum. Quadrupeds have deep rib cages from top to bottom, which is actually from backbone to chest. And many of them have sternums that stick out to house large pectoral muscles to hold themselves up, or in the most extreme case, pull the animal's arms down in order to fly. Birds have sternum bones that are like keels on a boat. When you study torsos, details are not as important as the big, simple components and how they're shaped. Most of the little bumps on a pelvis will not help you to draw an animal. The thing that will help is the simplified form. And ribs don't help you to draw a rib cage, at least until you have the overall structure. Here's an assignment. Draw a series of animals with a single line for the spine and a pelvis, a rib cage, and a head. If it seems too simple, challenge yourself by putting them into 3/4 and foreshortened positions. And remember, before we can do advanced form studies, we have to master simple ones. Torso muscles. Torso muscles can barely be seen on a fleshed animal, but we study them anyway so that we know what goes on under the surface and so that we can exaggerate convincingly. Let's look at the major groups. Rectus abdominis flexes the torso. Sacrospinalis straightens the torso and lifts the neck. Both of those are straight muscles, so they simply bend or extend the body. The muscles on the side are not straight. They're at an angle. That means they're oblique. There's an external oblique and an internal oblique. We'll see that they spin or twist the torso. Here are examples of what the torso muscles do. Pitching is when an animal moves forward and back, up and down. Those are the back and belly muscles at work. Yaw means heading to the left or right. Both muscles on one side pull the torso toward that side. Those are the obliques. Rolling happens when spiral muscles on either side pull to twist the rib cage so that it leans into a turn. It's also called banking. If you want a drawing challenge, try drawing variations of these from different angles, above, at eye level, below, and in various foreshortened positions. But to do that, you may need more information than we've dealt with so far. Multiple views. Studying side views isn't enough. They only give us 2 dimensions of a 3-dimensional animal. We need to see width as well as depth measurements. This diagram represents 3-dimensional space. If x represents width, and y height, and z depth, This front view of a human skeleton shows us its height and width, but there's no way to know how deep this character is because we're looking along a foreshortened depth line. Until we spin him to the side, now we can see the depth as well as the height and width. Let's apply this to an animal. From the side, we see the lion's height and depth, but there's no way to know how wide the lion is because the width line is foreshortened. But if we have a top view, we can now see that the widest part of a lion is its head. A horse is the opposite. The widest part of a horse is at the pelvis. But from this top view, we can't tell how tall the horse is until we move it into a side view. So there they are. Two or more views can give us enough information to build forms. So let's work on that. Artists choose forms. This is a good choice for an animal torso. The pelvis as a box, the rib cage and head as eggs. But it's not the only choice. A beach ball for a pelvis, a barrel for a thorax, and a tapered box, that's a wedge, work well and include more than just the skeleton. As you get advanced, you can use more complex forms, a box that tilts down because pelvises always tilt down, and a sacrum that points up because sacrums sometimes point up. We've seen that the core of the spine is convex and the contour is concave. Now we're showing that in 3D. We're showing that the core of the neck begins low, and we're showing that the head is more than an egg or a box. This analysis shows smaller forms on the bigger form. We choose whatever shows this creature as the three-dimensional being that it is. When I first saw a famous art teacher draw strange-looking bean forms, twisting and floating, it baffled me. Now I understand what a sound approach that is to figure or animal drawing because it puts the big parts of anatomy first. A bean is easier to master than a body, and it gives a basis for a body. But we choose whatever forms work best. Some animal torsos stay rigid enough to fit into a box. Knowing the base of that box is helpful. It lets us keep track of the feet on the ground. But because an animal can move, we separate the pelvis and thorax as well as the head. In most animals, the thorax aims down. But sometimes it aims up. And by the way, form studies don't have to be based on anatomy. Sometimes we just use them to see planes as we rehearse for a drawing. But it's okay to begin loosely, even with a scrawl. It helps keep the lines alive for the finished piece. My student Stephen Ganawan did this exaggerated analysis of a sloth skeleton, treating bones as robot parts. A great way to learn. The torso is the source. Hind legs, forelegs, neck, and head emerge from it. In our next lessons, we'll study the limbs. Hind legs.